Hi, mine's Phil. I like talking about politics. And although the future looks bleak for the current Conservative government, we must not forget that the next election will not be anything like the last one. Although Boris Johnson has not been governing, he has been changing laws and removing standards to ensure that he is well placed to win power without needing many actual voters at all. The process is intended to become much less democratic, and although there is resistance, there is time for him to break it down. But he has also just set a very interesting precedent. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news in politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So the elections bill passing through Parliament is one in a big pile of controversial government bills designed to seize power without popular support. Remember that first past the post already does this. The Conservatives won a large majority of seats in Parliament in 2019 and so hold 100% of the power quite comfortably. They can even afford a few dozen rebels. However, they only got about 43% of the votes. But even that isn't enough for them. On the current trajectory, the Conservatives could easily lose the next election, so they need to make the process even less democratic. They are changing boundaries to maximise the number of seats a Tory vote will get them. They are also trying to bring the Electoral Commission under their control. The Conservatives are also pushing for voter suppression. They are doing this in the form of voter ID. Now, there are people in other countries who don't see the problem. And, you know, if you have ID, well, we've got ID, we carry it around with us anyway. Why not just use it for voting? In theory, there's nothing at all wrong with presenting ID for almost anything like this. But there are a couple of issues here. First of all, people in the UK don't often have ID. We have this weird philosophy, and it's the right-wing media that sowed the seeds of this, that having to carry our proof of identification, that's what they did in Nazi Germany. It's not for dear old Blighty. And as I say, it was the Conservatives who raged against the prospect. You know, the last Labour government thought about compulsory ID. And it was the Conservatives that went loopy about it, and then Labour decided it was too much hassle. You know, now the Conservatives are all for requiring it, but not actually issuing it. They are calculating that it'll largely be people who are more inclined to vote Labour who won't have the ID with them. And the second thing following on from that is they're going to try and make sure that it's not Tory voters who are hit by this. Because I was thinking with this policy, well, here's the thing, you see. They could actually shoot themselves in the foot. Because who are they? What are their main demographics at the moment? It's workers, ordinary workers who have been screwed over by their own system, and elderly voters. Aren't they two demographics that are actually much less likely to be carrying photo ID with them? You know, but there was a suggestion that what they'll do is fiddle it so that in the list of allowable IDs, it'll include almost anything, for example, a pensioner might have, because older people mostly vote Tory, but they'd reject forms of ID like, say, rent books, that will be disproportionately held by people less likely to vote, like the poor, and who are also much less likely to have photo ID of any form. But the Lords have rejected that. For all the whining about fraud, there isn't any. I could count on the fingers on one hand the number of times someone's tried to defraud the electoral process. There's zero evidence of any issues with the current system. Not one single investigation has turned up any problems. We've had over a decade of Tory rule now. If they were that seized upon it, you know, their investigations would find evidence, wouldn't they? They're not finding anything. But it has been defeated by the Lords. But if the Conservatives really want it, they will get it. They've got over 2 more years to force it through the House of Lords if they are determined. But there was another proposal that did survive the passage through the Lords. It's not completely gone through yet, but it is now going to survive. The government are changing the way that the London mayoral elections will be run. Previously, there was a transferable vote system in place. So you had a first and a second choice. This does not favour an extreme party like the Conservatives. When it comes to the vast majority of voters, they might be, you know, the Conservatives might be a lot of people's first choice, but hardly anyone's second choice. Labour, on the other hand, could be first choice for a lot of voters, but also second choice as well. For example, in the last election, Labour's Sadiq Khan gained 200,000 second preference votes. The Conservatives' Sean Bailey only got 6,000. So they changed the system to favour the Conservatives. They are making it first past the post again. Now, that doesn't mean they will win the next time. After all, London, it tends to lean more towards Labour supporting, but it does give the Conservatives a much better chance. It will mean that people in London who would prefer the Labour candidate, but not as their first choice, will have to choose between voting tactically or risking their worst choice of realistic candidates from winning. And to think that the Conservatives try and defend first past the post as both simple and fair. It is clearly not fair that someone with less than 50% of the votes gets 100% of the power, and it is far from simple when the only way to counter this is to have to vote tactically. A simple and fair system, objectively, is one where you can vote for your preferred candidate or party, knowing that nobody will take full power unless they get over half the vote. But this move does something else as well. Now, I've talked about how the Conservatives want to reform the electoral process. Well, now let's consider the electoral reforms that other parties would like. Now, top of my personal list would be proportional representation for Westminster elections. Single transferable vote is preferred for some, and I would certainly get behind that as better than first past the post, or if I believed it would be an easier sell to the public. But in point of fact, I don't think it'd be an easier sell to the public. But anyway, I've talked in the past about how Labour as a party are now clearly in favour of proportional representation, but that the leadership may well be wary, with good reason. The next election will be so tight, especially with the reforms the Conservatives are implementing. Labour cannot afford to adopt any policies that could be net vote losers in key target seats. This is what I try and explain to Labour supporters. You try and say, oh, why aren't they adopting this policy? Why aren't they adopting that policy? But they should not adopt any policy that might be a net vote loser. Must not. It's too important. Winning the election is all important right now. No policy is important enough to risk that outcome. Any manifesto promise to bring in a specific form of electoral reform, especially for general elections, will meet with fire and fury from both the sitting government, who have a direct link to the public with publicly funded money, and their well-funded propaganda outlets, and the mainstream media. It would be incredibly risky, to say the least. And if the Conservatives win the next election, expect even more undemocratic electoral reforms. We may well be getting to the point where democracy completely fails in Britain. I said in 2019, when I looked at the Tory manifesto, this 2019 will be the last general election that is fought on anything like a democratic basis. The next election now will not. You looked at the manifesto and you looked that they're implementing it and more, but the one after it could be much worse. And we know how, from history, how that ends up going. You either need a violent revolution or you end up stuck in a cycle of fascism. Much easier just to tick the right box at the next election and reverse the madness while it's still easy to do so. So let's say Labour do get fully behind serious electoral reform for Westminster, but let's say it's too risky to make a manifesto commitment. You would think the process would then be to win power without that promise, but then to hold a referendum on the matter, because you haven't promised to do it, so then you need a referendum. That's the right way to do things. That's the democratic way to do things. Obviously, you need to make sure that the referendum is run legally. If you are wanting to introduce major constitutional change, you either put it in your manifesto or you hold a referendum. Well, the Conservatives have just changed the way millions of Londoners will be voting in their next mayoral election. They were not given a referendum. And it was not in the Conservative Party manifesto. They're trying to claim it was, we said we've commitment to first past the post. This isn't commitment to first past the post. You did not promise to change the way any elections run. They've just done it. As Andrew Lewin, a Labour activist, noted, presents an interesting precedent. After all, if the Conservatives can instigate the change in an electoral process without either a manifesto commitment or a referendum to the people affected, why can't Labour? What if Labour came to power without any manifesto promise to reform Westminster elections, but then just did it? Oh, you changed the mayoral elections from transferable vote to first past the post? OK, we'll change Westminster elections from first past the post to proportional representation. What if they tried the Conservative dodge and said it was in my manifesto? In our manifesto, we said we're going to be committed to fairness and equality. This is just making good on that promise. Well, it doesn't mean that, though. It does to us. You almost wonder if Labour peers let these changes go through in order to be able to pull the same trick in reverse. I don't actually think that, in all seriousness. But I cannot think why more Labour peers did not turn up to vote the move on mayoral elections down. I do not know why the Lords let this through. The numbers were there to stop it. They just didn't. But anyway, there we are. That is the latest on yet more power grab attempts by the Conservatives. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.